So it is known as the wavelength. As you can see here, it is a peak from one. It is wavelength is defined as peak from. It is a distance between the two peaks. So is high, the wavelength will be less, and when frequency is low, the wavelength will be high. That is a normal perception about this thing. So if you consider that previous lecture, then we have discussed that in the electromagnetic spectrum, we have applications in different areas. We have image processing applications in the X-rays, in the ultraviolet band, in the infrared band. We have applications in the radio waves as well as in microwave. So there is the overall electromagnetic spectrum. Now from that, if we consider, then our focus is normally the visible band, which is between ultraviolet and infrared band. And when we calculate the energy, you can see here, the term is energy of one photon. So it is measured in electron volts. Also, you can convert that energy into watts, which normally you can see in the various LED bulbs nowadays. They are using the another measure that is known as watts. So basically, energy is defined as H into V, where H is Planck's constant. So this all these things you have studied in your 11, 12 science physics, and just for your reference. And V is the frequency in the hertz. So also you can calculate the energy in terms of watts, and you can convert this electron volt into watts as well. It's very easy. It is just one simple equation. So basically, our goal is how we are getting the picture in our eyes. That is our main goal. That when you see any object, how we are getting that in the eyes. So colors that human perceive in an object are determined by the nature of the light reflected from that object. It is the obvious thing which we know since our school. The colors that human perceive in an object are determined by the nature of the light reflected from that object. So light that is void of color is called monochromatic light or gray level, or it is also known as intensity. So when we consider a light which is having no color is known as a monochromatic light or a gray level, or it is known as the intensity. On the other hand, color or chromatic light spans the electromagnetic energy spectrum from approximately 0.43 micrometer to 0.79 micrometer. So we have two types of light. One is known as intensity or gray level or monochromatic light. Another is known as a chromatic light, that is a color. So what color we can perceive is just the light which is reflected from that object. If you can see a green color, that means that green color is reflected from that object. That's why you can see. Now radiance is the total amount of energy that flows from the light source. It is measured in watts. So there are normally two terminologies. One is known as photometry, another is known as radiometry. So those who are dealing with radiometry, they are using this term radiance. Radiance is the total amount of energy that flows from the light source. It is measured in watts. When you purchase any LED bulb, you will find this value. It is an 18-watt LED bulb or 23-watt LED bulbs. It is nothing but the radiance. So this radiance is measured in watts, and on the other hand, energy which is measured in electron volt, and you can convert this electron volt into So from electron volt energy, we can get this radiance as well. The luminance measured in lumens gives a measure of amount of energy an observer perceives from a light source. So it is what a user will get. It is the amount of energy an observer perceives from a light source. So it will not be same as the radiance, because there are a lot of parameters which will affect this thing. The one is the surface from which it is reflected, and second, distance between the light source and the surface. So there are various parameters which will affect this luminance. So luminance measured in lumens gives a measure of amount of energy an observer perceives from the light source. And brightness is a subjective descriptor of light perception. So some people will feel it is a bright light, while other people will feel it is not that much bright. So it is a subjective descriptor. It is not objective. So normally we are aware with various kinds of sensors. So the first diagram is showing a simple single sensor. So when energy will fall, so energy means any kind of a light will fall on this sensing material. There is a filter above this sensing material. So when energy or a light source will fall on this sensing material, the sensing material, according to the energy, will generate a voltage waveform when it is power is given to this single sensor. And this housing is required to protect the sensing material. This housing is required to protect the sensing material. So normally you will hardly find this kind of a single sensor, but this kind of line sensor you can see in the second one in figure 2.12b. It is a line sensor. So normally this line sensor is very popular. When you consider any kind of a scanner, right? Flatbed scanner. You might have heard about a flatbed scanner. So in that flatbed scanner, you will find that there is a line sensor. That line sensor will move from the beginning of the document, it will go up to the end. And there are sensors on this strip. So in this strip, whatever the energy is incident, according to that, it will generate a voltage. And that voltage will be stored in the form of, that will be converted into a digital form. And that's how you can get the output. Similar to that, this kind of array sensor or grid sensors are also used. Right? Normally, when you are considering any solar panel, it is nothing but a array sensor. It is a solar grid. It is a grid or array sensor. So that solar sunlight will fall onto that solar panel. So there is a sensing material over there, and it will generate the voltage. That's how this solar energy is created. So basically, also if you are using a solar devices like solar cooker, then you will find that in solar cooker also what will happen, the solar sunlight will fall onto the various containers which are having a black color, because black color having a maximum absorption capacity. So that sunlight will fall onto that black color boxes. They are getting the maximum energy, and they form of a heat in the flue, get your food ready. You are able to cook the food. Seen on the terrace. So they are nothing but this kind of array sensors. Sensors are getting that, generating the voltage from. So the image processing kind of sensors to generate the digital image. Query up to this. Yes, is this clear? So these are the various sensors which are normally used in digital image processing. One is we have this kind of a sensor, which is a single sensor, and there is a motion of that sensor. So whatever picture is there, that is on the drum. You can see the picture or film, right? You can consider the word film also for that. So that film is covered on the drum. So the what sensor will do, that sensor will move from left to right. The sensor will move left to right, and it will sense one by one the information which is stored over there, and it will convert into a digital form. So that sensor is doing a linear motion only. So that is static, on which this sensor will move. So this kind of arrangement you can see normally in they are definitely not sensors, but in the printer similar thing is there. There is a horizontal movement of the printer head. So that printer head will move from left to right, and it will print the line on the page. So similar to that, this sensor is moving from left to right, and it will sense the details under that sensor. Once one line is over, the drum will be rotated further, and again the sensor will start the linear motion from left to right, and it will scan the second line. So normally this kind of sensors are also available in the market. Normally people are using this to scan the small documents. They have this kind of handy sensors, and this kind of device is there. So just they will put the picture over there, and then sensor will scan the entire image one by one point at a time, from left to right, and then the next row and the next row. So that is how the entire image will be scanned by this kind of sensors, and the 2D image is generated. Definitely this will take a lot of time, digital image, because we have a single sensor, so it will sense only one position at a time. It is not a array sensor, or a nowadays it is not used that much. So here you can see the example of image acquisition using a linear sensor strip. The first one, image is there below the sensor, and there is a sensor strip. It is doing a linear motion, so it is nothing but a flatbed scanner. Now, the next one is very interesting. It is focusing on the CT scan. So basically CT scan is nothing but a one kind of a sensing device. Shown here in this picture is nothing but the person or human or any one you can consider, right? Generate the 3D image. So here, because when persons are there, humans are there, we are using the X-rays as a source. So human will be considered as a 3D object, and that will move from outside to inside into this sensor ring. You can see a complete sensor ring. So when X-ray source will is there exactly on the opposite side of the ring, it will generate the cross section of the 3D object. So basically it is generating one cross section of that 3D object. Normally when you consider a normal X-ray of a human, at that time they are not taking a cross section, they are taking the front view, right? So because the X-ray source is on the top of the in front of the chest, and they are taking the chest X-ray, so it is just of the to a X-ray source. But when you consider the CT scan, they are not considering the front view, but they are passing the X-rays through from the side. So that's why it is generating one cross section image of the person at a particular position. So that is how when person is moving inside into a CT scan, cross sections generated. So when you put that all cross sections together, it will generate a 3D image of that person, which is normally used in various kind of medical services, in various kind of diseases. So basically, this image reconstruction component, which will combine this cross section of the 3D object, and it will generate exactly the 3D image. So if you consider on the net, there are various tools which are doing that activity very well. Tools which are showing that section of the various animals. So that kind of tools are also there. You might be aware about that. So it is a very popular thing that you will get a 3D cross section of the various animals through that tool. It is known as bioimage suit, something like that. If you search on the Google, you will find bioimage suit. So the purpose of that bioimage suit is that it is doing that thing. It is showing the cross section of the various animals when taken through this kind of a CT scan. So it is a very popular software. And it is available freely for the demo purpose. So let me share you that screen so you have some idea of that. It is given a name, Yale. It is by the Yale University. You might be aware about that. Bioimage suit is a very popular tool, and it is available for download. It is by the Yale School of Medicine. Yale University is a very popular university. So it is showing the various cross sections of heads of different persons, various animals, and everything is there. So let me share it if possible. So at least you have some idea. So I think because some sharing issues are there, so I'm not okay. Now it is possible, and now I'm able to share it. So it is this one. You can see this is nothing but your CT scan. So it is done by this kind of sensors. I hope you can see this, right? You can see the different CT scan images taken for different animals and different and body and everything. Right? So uh, it is available freely for demo purpose. It is a bioimage suit. So those interested can refer to this. So now let us proceed further. So we will discuss our main topic once again. So this is how actually this kind of images will be taken. It is a cross-section images of any 3D object, and through this a diagnosis can be done. So now the main thing is image acquisition process. So how we are getting the image. So there are two main phases. The first, from the light source, it will illuminate the source. So source means whatever light is incident on that particular. We have the light source that is generating the energy. We can say that will incident on the scene, but not necessarily that whatever energy is generated by the light source, same will be incident on the scene. So it is not the case because of the distance and other climate, air, everything, right? We will not get exactly the same energy which is illuminated by the source. So the energy which is falling on the surface, that is known as actually the illumination energy. That is known as the illumination energy. And then through a image processing system, imaging system, through a sensor, that will be converted into a digital image. So we'll see this detail completely. So if we represent this diagram, we can represent this image of formation as the total energy which is generated from the source, out of which the energy which is illuminated, actually falling. Illuminated means actually falling onto the surface for which you want to take a picture. Because when you start a torch is your one kind of a source. So when you start the torch and when you put that torch on any particular object, so whatever energy illumination you are getting on that object, that is the actual energy that object is getting. So it is known as illumination. Are you getting that? It is the known as the illumination, the amount of light incident or amount of energy that object is getting from the source. And it depends on the distance. If you are far away from the object and if you use the torch, definitely illumination will be less. If you are very close to an object and if you use the torch, illumination will be. Now according to the characteristic of the surface, a reflectance will be there. Reflectance will be there from that surface, because every surface has some reflectance, and the luminance which we perceive, which a human perceives, the image which is formed in the eye, at the fovea in the eye, it is known as a luminance. So it is based on two parameters, illumination and reflectance. So illumination into reflection is equal to a luminance for any particular point xy, for any particular point xy. So when I'm considering this picture, you can see that at a particular point here, when I'm putting a grid over this image, I have various points. So when I consider this particular point, there is no object. So at this point, we don't see anything. We see the white dot here. Here, there is a bright spot because there is a high illumination in this area. So according to that, we'll get this, and we are getting this kind of points in the output. So this kind of image will be formed in our eye, and that is how we can perceive the image in the eye. When you consider any monochrome image f of xy, monochrome means we are assuming a gray level image, intensity, pure image, color image. So it has two components, illumination and reflectance. At a particular point xy, what we are getting the output is equal to illumination at that point multiplied with reflection at that point. So sun on the earth, because sun is a light source with a very high energy. So same energy will not get on the earth. It is giving 90 90,000 luminance per meter square. 1 meter square area, it is generating luminance. And that's why I'm using this picture. This is the sun, and whatever it is generating on the earth is, if we consider as an object as earth, then it is the clear evening. If you consider the moon is not a very, so it is generating lamp per meter square. In a commercial office, various LED bulbs, tube lights, it is about 1000 lm per meter square. 1000 lm per meter square. So this is the illumination which is generated by the various objects. Different surface. Sun on the earth, on the different devices. So it is the illumination which is generated by the light sources. On the other hand, reflectance. So it is for a black velvet. If you go through a material like black velvet, the reflectance is very low, 0.01. For a stainless steel, so when you put a torch, when you throw a light from the torch on a stainless steel, 0.65, you can get some action in your eye. That's why sometimes you can see that if you put a steel dish in the sunlight, not be easy for your eye to handle, right? So it is 0.65 for the stainless steel. White wall, it is 0.80, right? For a white wall paint, it is 0.80. So that's why most of the people are preferring white walls in their houses, so that because of that there is a more reflectance. Because of more reflectance, it is easy for the room will look more bright. It is easy to see the objects if the walls are white. Reflectance means it is more bright. You can see more, you feel more brightness in the room. For silver plated metal, it is 0.90. So if there is a silver coin and if you throw a sunlight on it, or if you throw a light from your torch, high, 0.90. And the highest reflectance is for the snow, 0.93. The snow having the highest reflectance. So also you can see that white marbles, you might have heard about some news that people are going somewhere and there were white marbles, and because of the sunlight, there was so high reflectance that it damages the eye of a person. It is generated by the white marble also. So this is how you can see that importance of reflectance. It depends on the material. Yes, any query up to this? Yes, do you have any query? Is this terms clear? Illumination, reflectance, because these are that illumination means what? It is the light which is on the surface, falling on the surface. It is the illumination. Reflectance, it is the characteristic of that surface. Luminance is what a human perceives. It is what a human perceives. Is it clear? Can we proceed further? Yes. So I think the basic idea of image formation is clear, that how image is formed. It is because of this illumination and reflectance. So now, as you can see that when image is formed in the eye, two main parameters that is known as quantization. So now let us discuss what is sampling and quantization. So the output of most sensors is a continuous voltage waveform whose amplitude and spatial behavior are related to the physical phenomenon being sensed. To create a digital image, we need to convert this continuous sense data into a digital form. And this involves two things, sampling as well as quantization. Because it is a voltage. So now, once you are having a voltage, it must be converted into a digital form. And it depends on the sensor. If you are using a line sensor like this, take maximum samples 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So if I am using this kind of a line sensor and I want to scan any picture using my scanner, and if there are 20 sensors, that means it will note the information of 20 only. I have to sample the image. I have to sample the image. That means I am putting that entire sensor on the in that area, and I'm able to get the information. If I have, instead of 20, if I have 40 sensors in one line, then definitely I will get more detail. I will get more detail. So that's why you can see if we are using array sensor, then it is scanning more information meter square area or per centimeter square area. More detail. That's why you can see in the previous days, people were using then now people are using high definition televisions. So what is that high definition? That means we have that is captured using a different camera having a more sensors, which is 1080, which you know very well. That high definition is known as 1080. It's nothing but there are specialized cameras to take the picture. If you take a picture in high definition, it has more sensors in the per centimeter square area. So because of that, it will get more information. For every small area, you are getting the information from it. If you consider ultra high definition or 4K, so it is 4 times the is a word 4K, which is normally used in cinemas. So if pictures were taken using 4K cameras, that means it has 4 times high definition cameras. Are there a small detail very well? Less sensors are less details. So to convert a signal into a digital form, we have to sample the function in both coordinates and in amplitude. So digitizing the coordinate values is called a sampling process. So now let us understand what is a sampling. So here you can see that same picture is there. Here I am using array sensor. So I'm using a array sensor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Similarly here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So here this is the size of the array sensor, 14 into 12. So what will happen that we are superimposing this kind of grid onto an image. So you can see that every small square is showing a sample of the actual image. It is taking one sample of that actual image, and that sample will be digitized, and you are getting the corresponding output here. So here you can see that there are these two main areas. So for that two areas, we are getting this kind of output. So for each square, right, each square is one sample. It is known as one sample, and that sample is stored into a digital form corresponding to the voltage which is generated by that sensor, it will convert into some digital value. It will convert that into a digital value. Here you can see that because only small portion is there, only very small portion of the image is there in this particular sample, so which will not generate any significant voltage. So that's why here you can see no value in the output, because in this particular sample it is a very small portion of the foreground image or the object, so it is not generating any signal. If you can say any 3D object, and if you are using a sensor in front of it, right, because there is no 3D object in that area, it is very small, it will not generate a sufficient signal. So output will be like a background, so it is empty. So that's what you can observe. Similar situation is also here. Very small part of the actual object is there. It is not generating a sufficient signal for this 2. You are not getting the output for this 2 squares. So instead of this, here I am using 14 into 12. Instead of that, if I double the size of this sample, then I have more sensors, and each sensor will cover a small amount of area. Each sensor will cover a small amount of area, right? If it is right now covering 1 centimeter square, then if I am using more sensors, each sensor will cover 1 millimeter square area. If I am using more sensors, array sensors, then it will cover a less area. So we have more details. We have more details, and we have a better picture. So here you can see that we are getting the output for these squares. This 1, 2, and 3. In the output 1, 2, and 3, right? And that is this 3, 1, 2, and 3. Similarly over here, when it is a very small detail, here these small details we are not getting the output, but here we have sufficient detail, it will generate the sufficient signal. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We are getting the output signal. So this is known as a sampling, right? Is the sampling clear now? Is this sampling clear? What the sampling is? Yes, can we proceed? Any query in sampling? So 4K is your 4 times high definition. HD is your high definition, 1080 pixels. So sampling is just a grid. It is just a grid. More size of the grid we have, more size in the sense that more number of sensors we have in the grid, we have a better picture. Because we are getting minute details in a small area. So if we have more sensors, we can move from 1 centimeter square to 1 millimeter square. Further, if we are increasing the size of the sensors in that area, then we can go up to 1 nanometer square, and we have a better picture, because more small the size of the each area, better the clarity is. We are getting more clear details. We are getting more minute details from it. So now let us understand what is a quantization. So what is the difference between this sampling and quantization? So far I have discussed only what is sampling. More simple samples, more better a picture. Now another important term is a quantization. So quantization depends on a particular available intensity levels. So if I focus on this particular line, let us focus on this line, right? Let us take this line. So if I plot a graph of this, the graph will be like this. Here we have a totally white, and then we have some blacks. So we can take any one such line. We can take any one such line from this sample image. And now let us quantize it. So here one such example is taken. You can see here that this indicates your white portion. This one, just I am mapping this to, as you can see here. Then because there is a gray scales, we are getting this area. So it is this one. Now here we can see a clearly white, bright area, very bright. So that's why if I take another color for representation, so this part is here. Again, we have a gray area. So just we are taking the sample, one line, and how we'll quantize it. Let us see. And at last we have this. So up to this, you will get this kind of color, and here you will have this two white area. So same thing is here. We'll get this here. So basically, this is one such line. We are just scanning one line through a line sensor. One line through a line sensor. So now when you want to quantize, here you can see similar to a sampling. Here we have a quantization levels. So normally this kind of strip you can see in various advertisement of cosmetics nowadays. They are showing that if you use our particular cosmetic, your skin tone will improve by 2 levels. You can see this kind of strips in the advertisement of various cosmetics. That if you use the cream, your skin tone will improve by 2 or 3 levels. So that is nothing but a quantization level. So now you can see that here in this particular example, I'm using a quantization level of 8. That means in the output, I will generate only 8 values. Whatever voltage will come, I will generate only 8 values from that as a digital value. So what I have to do, that I have to convert the analog value of the voltage into a digital form. So when the value is very high, it will be mapped to this white color, right? If I give the numbers like 1 to 8 or 0 to 7, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. The voltage generated by the sensor is very high. It will be mapped to 7. It will be mapped to 7 because it is white. Then here, when the voltage generated by the sensor is very low, right? So this will be converted into a value 1. When the voltage generated by the sensor is intermediate, it will be mapped to this 4. So basically what we have done, that we have taken the 4 samples from here, as you can see, right? As you can see in the 4 samples from here. So definitely I'm using not this grid, but I'm using a better grid, which is generating 4 samples from here, like this, 1 and 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the 4 samples. So I'm generating 4 samples from this area. And now for that sample, I will map it to this quantization level, the corresponding digital value. So for that, the corresponding color is white. So we are keeping a note of that thing. We are using a 7 for it. Now, similar to that, from this, in this area, we are taking these samples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are samples. This square indicates the samples. This square indicates the samples. I hope you can clearly see these samples. So the square indicates the samples. So for each sample, I will try to find the by the sensor, and according to the value, that value will be mapped to some quantization level, some digital value. So we can say, just for example, I'm taking that suppose our sensor is able to generate a 0 to 100, right, as a value. Our scanner is able to generate this kind of 0 to 100 as a value. So what I will do, I will map a 0 to 12 as a level 0, then 13 to 24 as digital value 1. So if any of this voltage will be generated between 30 to 24, I will store 1 as a digital value. Similarly, 25 to 35, I will give 2. So that is how I will convert this range of voltage values into one digital value. it is known as a quantization process. Is it clear? So I will convert a certain range of voltages into, it will be mapped to a certain digital value. So here I have used 8 quantization levels. So I will map any voltage from minimum to maximum to 0 to 7. Here I am mapping any voltage from 0 to 7. So basically it is one kind of a normalization process. So basically analog voltage value will be converted into a digital form. So this picture shows both. You can see a sampling as well as quantization. This squares are indicating the sampling which is taken. This is another sample which is taken by the sensor. This is the third sample which is taken by the sensor. So these are indicating the samples. Line sensor for one line. And voltage value which is obtained is mapped to this digital value. So for each sample, we'll generate some voltage, and that voltage value is mapped to some digital value through this normalization between 0 to 7. So it is known as a quantization process. So as a result of sampling and quantization, we are able to get the digital image in the computer. So is the difference between sampling and quantization clear? Is the difference between sampling and quantization clear? Okay, so can you tell me, if we increase the quantization level, what will be the impact on the image? If you increase the quantization level from 8 to 16, what will the impact on the image? If I am using a suppose I am using a 3-bit for quantization, and instead of that I am using a 16-bit for quantization. Yes, so this is the correct thing which we can consider, that we have more number of colors or we have more shades in the image, because as you increase the quantization level, that means you are giving more shading. Here I am using 8 levels in this quantization. Instead of that, if I am using 16 levels, more shading, so it will be more realistic picture. So quality of the image will definitely increase, and definitely it will increase the size of the image, because to store that quantization level, we need more bits. Right? More quantization levels means more bits. If I have 8-bit image, a grayscale image, then it requires a less space. If I have a 16-bit image, that means I have more quantization levels. So it requires more space also. So through us increasing a sampling or by increasing a quantization, we are always increasing the size of the image. So when you are considering your 48 megapixel mobile camera, is it a sampling or quantization? If I consider 48 megapixel camera in your mobile, is it a sampling or quantization? Yes, can you tell? Yes, if I'm considering a 48 megapixel camera, is it a sampling or quantization? I got an answer from only one student so far. It is definitely a sampling. It is a sampling, right? When you consider megapixel, means more samples are there. The camera in that particular mobile having more sensors. It is taking more information per millimeter square area when they are taking the pictures. So it is a sampling, definitely. So now here you can see that, just for your clarity, I am considering this one line of this image. So if you use your Octave or MATLAB, any software, you will find this is a one line which I am considering. Right, I am considering this one line and I am plotting that graph. So you can see clearly that from this one line, what we'll get. I hope you are able to see that line. Right? So for this one line, if you plot the graph in this grayscale image, so you can clearly see here there is a gray area. This area is gray. So you can see this kind of gray levels. Here we are using 8-bit gray levels. 8-bit gray levels means 256. Quantization. So here we have two things. In your sampling, while y is indicating graph. So can you tell that what will be the graph if it is a color image? What will be the graph if it is a color image? I hope this is clear, right? We are just scanning one line and we are plotting it using your Octave or MATLAB, any software. Line. This is indicating the sampling, the number of samples taken. So basically it is the size of the image. And then y-axis is indicating the quantization level. Y-axis is indicating the quantization level. So if it is a color image, can you tell what will happen? Yes, can anyone? So basically the color image is composed of planes R, G and B. When you consider color image, same picture, you have three components, red, green and blue. Three planes are there. It is composed of three images. So if I plot the one plane of it, so here you can see this one such plane from the color image. So you can see that you are getting dark areas more. So this is what we'll get the graph for the same middle line. For this line, we are getting this kind of graph for this one plane. For this second plane, R, G and B, there are three planes. Right? For the same line, you can see here, this is the line which we are considering. We are getting this kind of graph. So we have to separate out each plane and we are getting this graph for this one scan line of the image. In the sampling, y-axis is indicating the quantization. That here there is a sunlight. So you can see the peak in the graph as well. So you can see the black area. This is another plane. This is the third plane of the same image. Right? There are three planes in the color image, R, G, and B. So you can see in the third plane, the picture is almost bright. You can see a high brightness. The picture is almost bright, almost white. So because of this, you are getting this. Because of this, you are getting this. This middle area, you are getting here. And this white area, you are getting here. So these are three different planes, R, G, and B. We have to extract the three planes from the image, and for each plane we can plot the line so we can get the clarity. That this is how sampling and quantization in the image will work. So I hope things are clear. Yes, we'll stop the session here.
Good morning to all of you. So before we begin with the topics, or rather the topic that we are going to cover today, okay, I would like to ask you whether you have any questions regarding what we have learned so far, especially in generation of three address code, right, which we discussed last week. And in yesterday's lecture, what we saw was how we divide our three address code into basic blocks by first identifying the leaders, right? And then once the basic blocks are identified, we decide that which block is the predecessor or successor of which other block, right? And we also decide that which will be the entry point and which will be the exit point, right? And we will decide from where to where, right? From which block to which block the edge is supposed to be drawn, and hence we make a graph representation known as a flow graph for our basic blocks. So this is what we had discussed in last class, right? And what we covered so far was from the book by Aho Ullman, okay, also known as Dragon Book, right, which is one of the textbook or reference book of our subject. Now, today what we are going to discuss is we will see a detailed algorithm for elimination of common sub-expression, which was one of the optimizing transformation which we saw in the introduction to the subject, right? And we had seen a very small example, okay, to understand this concept. Now, what we are going to see is how step by step, okay, using an algorithm which is very popular, okay, that is known as available expression algorithm, okay, that we will learn today, and we will see that how this optimization transformation is going to happen. Okay, so let me give you a formal definition of what is common sub-expression elimination, right? And this topic, okay, it is given very well in the book by Steven Muchnick. Okay, let me type the name in the chat. So if you want to refer, right, as such, if you just follow the PPT, okay, I think that should be sufficient. But still, if you are interested, okay, then you can just refer this book. Let me type it down in the chat. It is Advanced Compiler Design and Implementation by Steven S. Muchnick. So today, what example I'm going to discuss, okay, it is from this particular book. Uh, right. And this is the book actually used not for undergrad level, okay, so not for this 7th CC subject, okay, we use this textbook for ACT, okay, so you are not required to refer this in detail, but there are some examples, okay, which are very well given in the book. Right. So let us start with the topic. So what is common sub-expression elimination? We are finding those computations which are always performed at least twice, okay, more than once, right, on a given execution of them. That is the common sub-expression elimination. We eliminate them, right? So how do we identify that an expression is a common sub-expression? Okay, there are two things we have to do. First is if there is another occurrence of the expression whose evaluation always precedes this one in the execution order. Now, you know that because of various flows, right, because of various loops in your code, many a times it may be possible, and also because of jump statements, right, there are so many things into your code, right, that you have to ensure that the occurrence of the expression is always preceding, okay, the expression that we are currently considering, then we can call it a common sub expression. And second thing, very, very important, that the operands of the expression remain unchanged between the evaluations, right? So if here we will be more giving emphasis on binary operations, right? So we will be talking about both the operands. So if any one of the operands changes, right, then the result will change, and then you cannot call it a common sub expression, right, and then you are not supposed to eliminate it because it will be a separate expression, right, it will not be a common sub expression. So these two things we have to keep in mind, that for every execution order, right, no matter how the flow goes on, right, in your code, the occurrence will always come after a particular expression, okay, then only that expression is called a sub-expression which is common, and the operands must remain unchanged. So what this transformation is going to do, it will remove the recomputations of common sub-expressions, right? And what we will do, we will replace them with the saved value. So what we will do, once an expression is evaluated, its result will naturally be stored somewhere, right? That saved value will be there. We will simply replace it when again that expression is encountered. We will just replace it with that value, so it doesn't have to recompute it. Okay, so this is the technique. Now, this is something which you must all note, that it is possible that the common sub-expression elimination that we are performing may not always be worthwhile. So you may end up complicating your code, okay, though you may feel that you are doing the task of simplifying it. Okay, so it is not always the case that this is useful, right? But it has got its own benefits, right? Because it is an optimization transformation, right? So we are required to know it, right? But it must be used judiciously. Now, the optimizers frequently divide this elimination technique, okay, into two phases. First one is that it is done locally within each basic block. Now you all know what a basic block is, right? Because we have already identified basic blocks and we have divided our code into different basic blocks and identified the flow, right? Why it is necessary to draw a flow graph? Why do we need to have a graph representation? So that we know that which expression comes before which one, okay? You to know the flow, graph is the best way of representing it, right? So that is why that step we have done first. Now for each basic block, if you go for the optimization, then it is called a local common sub expression elimination. And then once that is done, in the next phase we go about global, means you do it across the entire flow graph. Okay, now moving further, see over here, just have a look at this one. Okay, what we are doing on the left, okay, what you see is you should be able to find a common sub expression, okay, a plus 2. I hope you see it, right? In which blocks do you see a plus 2? Okay, you see it in B1. Where else? Yes, you see it in B1 and B3. Yes, correct. Very good. Right. So what we are seeing over here on the left is the flow graph. Okay, we have already made the flow graph. And now what we are trying to do is that we want to apply the technique. So over here, looking at the code, okay, you are able to see that, okay, a plus 2 is occurring twice. Now see if the operand, that is a and 2 is a constant. So naturally it is not going to change, right? It is a literal. But a, whether a is changing anywhere, see, visually, if you see, if A is changing anywhere in any of the flows, see, there are two flows possible, right? There is a condition. If yes, then a certain flow is followed. If no, then it goes through block 2, right? It goes through B2 and then it goes to B3, right? So in any of the flows, if A is not changing, okay, then it is possible to consider it as a common sub-expression, and then we will try to eliminate it. This one, right? So both these things we have to check, that a plus 2 in B3, okay, we don't have to compute it again, okay, and we will consider it as a common sub-expression if A is not changing anywhere, okay, after it is used in B1. Okay, so now let's see that when we do the common sub expression elimination, when we do the elimination, what happens to your flow graph? See what changes are made. Let us observe over here. See what we do. We store the computation a plus 2 into a temporary. Now all of you are well aware that what is a temporary, right? It is a compiler generated temporary, right? Used to store values, okay? But it is different from a variable. Variables are provided or given by the code which the programmer writes, right? And these temporaries are generated by the compiler itself. So T1 is storing the value of a plus 2. Now this T1 is now having the final answer which we will assign to B. So a plus 2 assigned to